There's this old story about a man who built a compass, and every time he used it, it pointed north, until one day it did not. Now, the compass was not really broken, it was working exactly the way it always had. The needle still pointed where the magnetic pole guided it, but this time something else had changed, something more fundamental and unique, something that he did not even think could change. No one had told him that. So what had changed was the magnetic field, because over time the magnetic north had moved, as it naturally does. So the compass was functioning just fine, and what had failed wasn't the tool, it was the assumption that the world it pointed to would never change. Now, the point of that story is that sometimes we continue our old ways of navigating the world, even though the reference point itself is undergoing a much deeper change. And I think that's what trust feels like in the age of AI. So when we ask, can we trust AI? We are not just asking whether we can trust the technology, we are asking something much deeper. We are asking, what does it mean to trust at all? Because you see, trust is something we fall back on when we have no guarantees, but we still somehow need to make some sort of a decision and move forward. So when I say I trust you, I'm exposing myself to some sort of a risk, but I also believe that you will act in a way that won't harm me. And when I say I trust an institution, I'm trusting its principles, I'm trusting its rules, its systems of oversight. And when I say I trust a tool, I'm trusting the consistency of its outputs. I know that the toaster is going to toast my bread, and the washing machine is going to wash my clothes, and the printer is going to print my documents. So trust in essence has a structure, it has a shape, it includes vulnerability, because you're vulnerable to the risks if your trust is broken. So let's say if you trust an entity and they don't operate fairly, then what happens? Well, you feel violated. If you spend money to buy a machine from a website and it doesn't work well, you feel cheated, you feel exploited. Trust also includes expectations. You are expecting a certain outcome by taking that risk of trusting someone or something. And it also involves some sort of repercussions, because whoever breaks your trust then has to face certain consequences. So for example, if the institutions you trust with your data cannot maintain your privacy, they need to ideally compensate you for it. So this play between vulnerability, expectations, and consequences maintains the sanity of trust. It's some sort of a philosophical contractualism in action, which is simply this idea that the society only functions because people implicitly agree to everyone's interests. Because if any of the foundational elements of trust disappear, the system breaks down. But then what happens when the system you're trusting doesn't quite fit that model? When the system itself is fundamentally different? So AI, and especially the large language models, don't quite fit that traditional model. They are not like the traditional tools. So here's an example. Say you really trust a company that built a certain application, and the company trusts its developers who built that application, and the developers trust the training data that they use to build the applications. But then the training data comes from the real world, which is messy. It's kind of messy because it's full of biases and misinformation. So then it needs fine-tuning and guardrailing and adversarial testing to just make it safe and worthy of use. Which means that in that chain of trust, you are not just trusting a tool in your hands. You are essentially trusting a stack of decisions, assumptions, and processes around a super complex neural network with trillions of weights in them. So when you look inside it, if you even can, you are basically going to be staring at a black box. A black box with trillions of parameters trained on oceans of content. So you can see what it does, but you often can't see why it does something. Even the model builders often can't see that. And that breaks something fundamental in the way we trust, because the traditional trust is built on predictability. You do X and you get Y. But with LLMs, the same input today and tomorrow may give you two versions of Y, or something that looks like Y but has some sort of a glitch tucked inside. So what that means is that we need to reshape the way we think about trust. We cannot just trust the output alone. We need to trust the process that surrounds the system, and we need to ask a few questions. We need to ask how the model was trained, what are the guardrails, how was it tested, how is it being monitored and audited, how is it being corrected, those sorts of things. Now look, someone may argue that we already trust complex and opaque systems every day, so it's not something super new or unprecedented. I mean, we trust systems like airplanes and vaccines and encryptions, even though an average person doesn't quite understand the algorithm these things work on. And that's a fair point, except if you think about it again, you realize that the other opaque systems are still designed to be decoded. So when they fail in ways that can be traced. They offer structured causal chains to those who want to investigate the failure. So the experts, like say the forensic department, they can audit and identify and analyze the root cause of a plane crash, because they can actually look at the core issue in isolation and they can decompose all of it. And based on that, they can hold the person or the thing that caused the crash accountable. And sure, that range can vary depending on the error. It can be a person, it can be a policy, it can be a design flaw, or it can be a mix of things. And yeah, it may not always be a simple exercise and it may follow a chain of events, but at least it's possible. But with AI, especially large distributed systems, that accountability basically gets diffused, because now there are just too many hands, it's just too many black boxes, too many gray zones. And LLMs are also different because their behavior is emergent. It changes, it drifts, it hallucinates. And it's also contextual because it changes with the user's intent and query. So unlike the other opaque systems, it's more probabilistic and less deterministic. So when we say we are trusting the GenAI applications today, we are essentially trusting the systems around the systems and not trusting what lies inside the LLMs. So it's a fundamental shift from the epistemic trust to what the AI literature now calls procedural assurance. Because now we are trusting the guardrails, we are trusting the data it is built on, we are trusting the layers of accountability that makes it reliable. But then again, what's interesting is that the further removed someone is from the model's inner workings, the more likely they are to trust it. So an average human being with absolutely no awareness or knowledge of how a model works is very likely to anthropomorphize it. Because at the end of the day, we are emotional creatures. We are not used to evaluating things and we just relate to things. So when a thing talks like a person in natural language with realistic emotional empathy and tone, we start to project our intent on it. We begin to trust the interface we are interacting with instead of the infrastructure underneath it. And we forget that we are not talking to a human mind, we are talking to a model. So as of today, let's say you give an input to a really advanced system like your laptop or your phone that doesn't run on LLMs, you basically don't end up anthropomorphizing its output. You trust it based on its performance, on the quality of the output it produces, and you sort of remove your emotions from the process. But on the other hand, if you use the advanced voice mode on any of the applications built on LLMs that basically talks back to you, you may end up building some sort of an emotional trust with it. And that's a category error, because at that point, you're confusing emotional engagement with functional reliability. And when you do that, you're basing more confidence in its output than it has actually earned. And actually, it just doesn't stop there, because one more way in which the idea of trust changes is when you consider the aspect of agency. Because if you look at all of the human evolution, We have always used the systems that act based on our commands. They're not autonomous. We give them commands and then they respond. But as the AI becomes more agentic, that traditional model starts to become blurry too. And yeah, we are not there yet. But when we are, when a fully agentic system that has a fleet of agents that initiate a task, optimize it, delegate the tasks, monitor it, and basically do the end-to-end work, it will start to seem like a more alive system overall. And it will seem much more alive than what it feels today. So as a result, we may start assuming their intentions. We may start trusting them as actors, start trusting them as our personal champions and teammates, while forgetting that they're essentially just machines. And yes, they will be highly capable, highly interactive, but they will still just be a system that is going to be behaving based on its design. And yet, we will make this mistake of trusting them as entities instead of trusting their decision-making process. So what is the message here? So what? If our old model of trust doesn't work the way it's supposed to, who cares? And why should anyone care? Because at the end of the day, we cannot do anything about it, right? Well, not quite, because we still have the ability to recognize the shift that we are going through and then remind ourselves that we have to recalibrate the way we trust, because we are moving from intent-based trust to more of a design-based trust. And we need to take that into account when we make real-world judgment based on the output of the system. We need to place the trust in the structure around the systems. We need to trust the ecosystems that are built around it. We need to be aware that we are moving from trusting the intent to trusting the infrastructure underneath all of it. Because just like the man and the compass story, we need to understand that our point of reference has shifted. So as we navigate the world, we need to take the new frame of reference into account. And that's the new compass.